Harold Webb extended his hand across the picnic table, the same rough palm that had turned wrenches for 40 years. The younger man, Derek, his wife called him, looked at it like Harold was offering him a dead fish. "Linda says you don't mind me joining." Derek's cologne arrived before his handshake didn't. 68 years old, and Harold was being dismissed at his own damn barbecue. The spatula trembled in his other hand. Burgers hissed on the grill behind him. Earl watched from across the street, that leather journal of his open on his porch rail. Harold dropped his hand, forced a smile that felt like swallowing glass. Later, carrying plates inside, he heard them through the kitchen window. Derek's voice, low and smug. "When are you gonna tell the old man?" Linda's laugh cut through everything else. Light, girlish, a sound Harold hadn't heard in years. Just not for him. Never for him anymore. He'd been a fool, but that was only the beginning. The morning had started normal enough. Harold up at 5:30, same as always, coffee in his father's chipped mug, the one with the faded Webb sun barely visible anymore. Linda had still been asleep when he'd set up the folding chairs in the backyard, arranged the cooler, checked the propane. Memorial Day. 40 years of marriage, and they still did the same barbecue every year. Tom from next door, the Pattersons from church, Pastor Jim, if he wasn't too busy. Nothing fancy, just burgers and the kind of small talk that fills a Sunday afternoon in a town where everyone knows everyone else's business. Except this year, Linda had asked if a friend could join. Harold should have known then. The guests arrived around noon. Tom brought potato salad his wife made. Mrs. Patterson carried one of those store-bought pies that everyone pretends is homemade. Pastor Jim showed up in his civvies, grateful for a day off from collar and questions about the Lord's mysterious ways. Linda was different. Harold noticed it the way you notice a tooth that started to ache, gradually then all at once. New perfume, something floral that didn't smell like her, hair done up in a way that seemed too fancy for burgers in the backyard. She kept checking her phone, smiling at the screen like it was telling her secrets. Derek rolled up at 1 o'clock in a leased Mercedes that still had the dealer plates. Younger, maybe 52, 53. Gym fit in the way men get when they're trying to outrun their age. Polo shirt tight enough to show it off. Cologne cloud that walked in before he did. "You must be Harold." Like he was doing Harold a favor, learning his name. Harold wiped his hand on his apron, force of habit, mechanic's hands always needing a wipe, and stuck it out. Derek looked at it, looked at Linda, looked back at Harold's grease-stained palm like it might leave a mark on his precious skin. "Linda says you don't mind me joining." The hand hung there. Harold felt every eye on him. Tom pretending to adjust the umbrella, Mrs. Patterson suddenly real interested in her pie. Even Pastor Jim found something fascinating about his sweet tea. Harold dropped his hand. More the merrier. Derek smirked, actually smirked, then walked past Harold like he owned the place, made straight for Linda, touched her arm in a way that was just a hair too familiar. Harold turned back to the grill. The spatula shook in his grip. Burgers sizzled, fat popping and hissing. He focused on that sound, counted the pops. Anything to keep from turning around and seeing what he knew he'd see. Earl Thompson was on his porch across the street. 72 years old, Korean War vet, widow of 3 years. He had that leather journal open, the one he was always writing in. Probably bird watching, Harold had always figured. But Earl was watching the backyard, and he was writing. And when their eyes met, Earl didn't look away. The afternoon crawled. Derek held court like he'd been invited as the guest of honor, made jokes about old dogs and new tricks that got uncomfortable laughs, stood too close to Linda, touched her shoulder when he talked. She laughed at everything he said, that light, girlish sound that Harold remembered from 40 years ago when they were young and stupid and believed in forever. She never laughed like that anymore, not at home, not with Harold. He was bringing in the empty platter, hands full, when he heard them in the kitchen. Didn't mean to eavesdrop. Didn't mean to hear Derek's voice, low and pleased with itself. "When are you going to tell the old man?" Harold froze in the doorway. Through the window, he could see them by the sink. Derek's hand on Linda's waist, her leaning into it. "Soon," she said. Then that laugh again. That sound that used to be his. Harold set the platter down real quiet, backed out before they could see him, made it to the grill, picked up the spatula, stared at the empty grates. Tom approached with his empty beer. "You all right, Harold? You look a little pale." "Fine, just the heat." But it wasn't the heat. It was the cold certainty settling in his chest like ice water. The way Linda wouldn't meet his eyes when she came back outside. The way Derek patted Harold's shoulder on his way out. "Thanks for having me, buddy. Real nice setup you got here," with just enough emphasis on "got" to make it sound temporary. The guests filtered out. Linda went inside without a word. Harold stood alone in the backyard, spatula still in his hand, watching the sun sink low. Earl was still on his porch, still writing in that journal. He looked up, caught Harold's eye, and nodded once. Not pity. Something else. Recognition, maybe. Like a soldier seeing another soldier who just realized he's standing in a minefield. Harold went inside. Linda was in the shower. Second one today, he noted. When she came out, she kissed his forehead like nothing had happened. "Good party," she said. Harold nodded. Didn't trust his voice. That night, lying beside her in the dark, he heard her phone buzz. Once, twice. She shifted, checked it, smiled at the screen's glow. Harold stared at the ceiling and wondered when his wife had stopped being his wife. Wondered how long he'd been the joke in his own life. Wondered what the hell tell the old man meant. And knew, with a sinking certainty, that he was about to find out. Harold started noticing things. Little things that added up like rust on a good engine. Small at first, then suddenly, you're looking at a seized-up block. Linda had her book club on Tuesday nights. Always had, for as long as Harold could remember. 6 o'clock, she'd kiss his cheek, grab her purse, say she'd be home by 9:30, 10 at the latest. Except Tuesday night, Harold drove past the library at 7:30. Building was dark. Sign on the door read, "Tuesday hours 10 a.m., 6 p.m." He sat in his truck across the street for 20 minutes, engine ticking as it cooled, trying to make the math work. Maybe they met somewhere else. Maybe they'd changed locations. Maybe... The maybes ran out around the time he admitted he was lying to himself. Linda came home at 1:45. Harold pretended to be asleep. Listened to her ease into bed like she was sneaking in past a curfew. She smelled different, not her usual soap. Something else underneath, cologne maybe, Derek's cologne. Wednesday morning at the shop, Mrs. Chen brought dumplings like she did every week. 78 years old, customer since Harold's daddy ran the place. She set the container on his workbench, studied his face. "You've been missing appointments, Harold. 3 this month. Not like you." Harold realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd actually focused on work. "Just getting old, I guess." "Old," she snorted. "I'm old." "Oh, you're troubled. Something wrong at home?" He wanted to tell her, wanted to tell someone, but the words stuck in his throat like bad transmission fluid, thick and toxic. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Chen." She squeezed his shoulder, left the dumplings, didn't believe him for a second. Sunday came. Church felt like walking through a room where everyone had just stopped talking about you. Harold took his usual pew. The men's breakfast group waved him over after service. Tom, Bill Henderson, couple others. But when Harold got close, the conversation died like someone had cut the engine. "Harold?" Tom nodded. Too hearty. Too forced. "Morning, fellas." They talked about the weather, the Rangers game, everything except what they'd been talking about before Harold walked up. He could feel it hanging there, the unspoken thing, heavy as August humidity. Pastor Jim caught him on the way out, careful, like he was approaching a spooked horse. "Harold, I saw Linda's car out by the Route 9 hotel Thursday night. Just wanted to make sure everything's all right." The Route 9 hotel, the one that rents by the hour as often as by the night. Harold's mouth smiled without permission. "Must have been someone else's car." Pastor Jim's eyes said he knew it was Linda's car. Said he was sorry. Said he didn't know what else to do but mention it. "Yeah," Pastor Jim said. "Must have been." Harold made it to his truck before his hands started shaking. That afternoon, he hung up Linda's jacket, the good one she wore to book club. A hotel receipt fell out of the pocket. Route 9 Motor Lodge, room 304. $147. Dated 3 days ago. He stood there holding it. The paper felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Thursday, Linda was in the shower when Harold went looking for aspirin in her purse. Derek's business card fell out. Derek Sloan, luxury real estate. Handwritten on the back, Tuesday, usual spot, with a little heart. Harold took a picture with his phone, put the card back exactly where he'd found it. His hands were steady now. Funny how that worked. Shock gave way to something colder, something that required precision. He checked the bank statement that came in the mail. New account he didn't recognize. Linda's name only. Withdrawals every Tuesday and Thursday. $200, $300 at a time. 40 years. 40 years of marriage, and here was the math of her betrayal, itemized in 12-point font. Thursday night he told himself he was just going for a drive. Told himself he just happened to end up in the parking lot across from the Route 9 hotel. Told himself he'd leave after a few minutes. He waited 3 hours. At 11:45, they came out together. Linda and Derek, laughing like they'd just heard the world's best joke. But there was a third person with them, man in an expensive suit, carrying a briefcase. Harold didn't recognize him. They got into Derek's Mercedes. Harold followed at a distance, watched them pull into Denny's, take a booth by the window. Through his phone's zoom, Harold could see documents spread on the table. The suited man pointing at papers. Derek nodding. Linda signing something. This wasn't just an affair. This was business. Earl's truck pulled up beside Harold's. The old vet climbed out, got in Harold's passenger seat without asking, handed him a pair of binoculars. "That's Jim Voss," Earl said quietly. "Developer. Bought out half of Main Street in the last 2 years." Harold's stomach dropped. Why would Linda be? "Been watching this 6 months, Harold. Got it all written down." Earl tapped the leather journal on his lap. "Figured you'd need to see it yourself before you'd believe it." Through the binoculars, Harold could make out the header on one document. Property appraisal, web workshop. His father's shop. The legacy Harold had spent 40 years maintaining. The only thing besides Linda he'd ever really loved. "They're not just stealing your wife," Earl said. "They're stealing everything." Harold lowered the binoculars. His reflection in the rearview mirror showed an old man he barely recognized. Tired, beaten, done. But underneath that, something else was starting to burn. "Show me," Harold said. "Show me everything you've got." Earl nodded. "Tomorrow morning. My place. Bring coffee. You're gonna need it." Harold watched Linda through the window, watched her laugh at something Derek said, watched her sign another paper without even reading it. 40 years. And he'd never known her at all. Friday morning, Harold sat at Earl's kitchen table with coffee he couldn't taste. Earl opened that leather journal like a prosecutor presenting evidence at trial. April 12th, Earl read. Derek Sloan vehicle, Texas plate XYZ1234, parked 2 blocks from your house, 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. He flipped a page. April 19th. Linda's car, Route 9 hotel, met by Derek Sloan, 7 p.m. check-in. 47 entries, 6 months of Harold's life, documented in Earl's careful handwriting while Harold had been pretending everything was fine. Earl slid photographs across the table, long lens shots. Linda and Derek entering the hotel, leaving, holding hands. Derek meeting with Jim Voss at an office downtown, pointing at documents. Linda at the county clerk's building, papers in hand. "I know a fellow does surveillance work," Earl said. "Taught him in the service. He owed me." Harold stared at a photo of his wife laughing, Derek's arm around her waist. "Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me, or would you have told me to mind my own business?" Fair point. Harold would have chosen the lie. Would have called Earl a meddling old fool and gone right back to pretending. Earl pulled out printed emails. "Got a guy who's good with computers too. Derek's not careful. Uses the same password for everything." Harold read the first one. Derek to Jim Voss. Target acquired. Old man's completely clueless. Property appraisal attached. Should be an easy flip. 85K commission for me. Target. Like Harold was a mark, a job. Another email, Linda to Derek. He suspects something, but he won't act. Too weak and tired to fight back. Weak. His wife of 40 years had called him weak. "There's more," Earl said. He pulled out a manila folder. "Court records. Derek's done this before. Twice that I could find. 2 cases. Margaret Henderson, 71, lost her family farm. Robert Chen, 66, lost his restaurant building. Both involved Derek. Both involved women close to the property owners. Both involved forged documents." "It's a system," Earl said. "He finds elderly folks with valuable property, works through wives, daughters, caregivers, gets access to financial information, forges signatures. His partner Voss buys the property cheap. Derek gets his commission." "Mrs. Chen's husband," Harold said slowly. "Robert. He was one of them." "Yep. Derek used the daughter-in-law that time. Robert had Alzheimer's, couldn't fight back. By the time the family figured it out, property was sold. Money was gone." Harold stood, walked to Earl's window. His workshop was visible from here. The building his father built in 1954. "Webb's son," the sign used to say, before weather wore it down to ghosts of letters. "Check your filing cabinet," Earl said. "I saw Linda there 3 weeks ago. She had a key I didn't recognize." They walked to the workshop in silence. Harold's hands shook getting the lock open. The filing cabinet in his office. Lock scratched fresh, like someone had picked it recently. Property deed drawer. Documents shuffled wrong. Harold knew exactly how he kept things. 40 years of the same system. He found the real estate appraisal first. Webb Workshop surrounding land. Estimated value, $340,000. Ordered by Elvis Webb. Dated 2 weeks ago. Then the preliminary sale agreement. Derek Sloan representing interested buyer. Harold and Linda Webb listed as co-owners. "I'm not a co-owner," Harold said. "My father left this to me, just me." Earl pulled county records up on his phone. Linda filed a co-owner claim 6 months ago, used old joint tax returns as proof. The power of attorney was next, giving Linda sole decision-making authority over the property. Harold's signature at the bottom looked almost right. Almost. But Harold was left-handed. This signature slanted right. "Forged," Earl said. "Notary stamp looks off too." The closing date was circled in red on the sale agreement. June 15th, 3 weeks away. Harold sat in his father's chair, the one where the old man used to do the books every Sunday night. The leather was cracked now, foam showing through. But it still smelled like him, Old Spice and motor oil. "They didn't just steal my wife," Harold said. "They're stealing my name, my father's name, everything we built. So what are we going to do about it?" Harold looked at the calendar. June 15th. 3 weeks to save 40 years of legacy. 3 weeks to fight back against people who'd been planning this for 6 months. "We need help," Harold said. "Legal help. And we need my granddaughter." Earl raised an eyebrow. "Sophie, but Linda said she didn't want to see you, that you two haven't spoken and—" "Everything Linda said is a lie." Harold pulled out his phone, found Sophie's number, hadn't called it in 3 years. Time to find out the truth. The phone rang once, twice. "Sophie? It's Grandpa. I need your help. It's bad, sweetheart. Real bad." Her voice came through, surprised and worried and immediate. "Grandpa? What's wrong? Can you come home? I'll explain everything, but I need you here. Please." A pause. Then, "I'm leaving in 20 minutes. I'll be there by tonight." Harold hung up, looked at Earl, at the forged documents, at his father's workbench. "They think I'm too old to fight," he said. "Too weak. Too tired." Earl's smile was thin and hard. "Then they don't know Marines." Harold waited up, sat at the kitchen table with the hotel receipt and Derek's business card in a folder. Not the forged documents. He'd keep those hidden, just enough to test her, see if she'd come clean. Linda came home at 11:30, humming. Stopped when she saw him. "You're up late." "Sit down, Linda. We need to talk." Something in his voice made her go still. She pulled out a chair, sat across from him like they were strangers at a bus stop. Harold slid the hotel receipt across the table, then the business card. Her face went through a whole performance, shock, fear, then tears right on cue, faster than seemed natural, like she'd been practicing. "Harold, It's not what you think. What do I think? He crossed a line. I never meant for it to go this far. She reached for his hand. He let her take it, felt nothing. It was stupid, meaningless. A mistake. Meaningless? Harold pulled up the bank statement on his phone. 6 months of hotel rooms is meaningless? $200 every Tuesday and Thursday is meaningless? Her tears came harder. Real ones now. Maybe. Hard to tell. I was lonely. You're always at the shop. Always with your father's tools. Your father's legacy. When did you last really see me, Harold? There it was. Make it his fault. Classic play. So you decided to steal my shop? My father's shop? Her face went white. I don't know what you're... Don't. Harold's voice went flat. Don't insult me more than you already have. End it. Now, call him and end it, or I call a lawyer in the morning. Linda's hand shook, reaching for her phone. She dialed, put it on speaker. Derek answered on the second ring. Hey babe, what's... Don't contact me again, Derek. It's over. My husband knows. Silence on Derek's end. Then, what's going on? We had plans. The closing is... Linda hung up before he could finish, looked at Harold with those tear-wet eyes. There, it's done. We can fix this. 40 years has to mean something. Harold studied her face. Wondered if he'd ever really known the woman behind it. All right, he said. We'll try. She came around the table, wrapped her arms around him. Thank you. Thank you for giving me another chance. Harold held her and felt absolutely nothing. Over her shoulder, his phone screen showed Sophie's text. Arrived. At a hotel. See you tomorrow morning. The war was coming, but Linda thought she'd won. The next week was a performance on both sides. Linda cooked pot roast, Harold's favorite, slept in their bed, held his hand watching TV, all the motions of a marriage being repaired. But she still checked her phone constantly, still had new clothes appearing in her closet, still took 3-hour grocery runs and came back with no groceries. Tuesday night, she kissed his cheek. Just running to get milk and bread. Okay. She came back 3 hours later. No milk, no bread. Forgot, she said. I'll go tomorrow. Harold said nothing, just added it to the list in his head. Thursday at church, Pastor Jim pulled him aside, smiled, relieved. You look better, Harold. Glad things are improving at home. Then careful. Though I did see Linda's car at that rest stop on Route 9 Tuesday night. Around 9. Just thought you should know. Harold forced a smile. Must have stopped for gas. Pastor Jim's eyes said he knew better, said he was sorry, said he'd tried. Wednesday afternoon, Harold was hanging up Linda's jacket when another receipt fell out. Same hotel, room 304, dated yesterday. Right in the middle of their reconciliation. He held it in his hands, standing in the hallway. Heard Linda singing in the shower. Second one today. Water running, washing Derek off her skin. Harold called Earl. She never stopped. It's still happening. You sure? I'm sure. Sophie here yet? Coming to the workshop tomorrow morning. Earl was quiet for a moment. You know what this means? Yeah. Harold looked at the receipt, at the date, at the proof that everything Linda had promised was a lie. I'm done pretending. That night, Linda came to bed smelling like that floral perfume, snuggled against him like nothing was wrong. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Once, twice. She checked it, smiled at the screen's glow. Harold stared at the ceiling, thought about 40 years of marriage, thought about his father's shop, thought about the closing date, June 15th, 2 weeks away now. Thought about Sophie, who'd driven through the night because her grandfather needed her. Linda's breathing evened out, asleep or pretending to be. Harold slipped out of bed, grabbed his phone, went to the porch, texted Sophie. Come to Earl's house, 8 a.m. Bring whatever you found on Linda's iPad. It's time. Her response came immediately. Already got everything. Grandpa, it's worse than you think. Much worse. Harold looked back at the bedroom window. Linda's silhouette behind the curtain, checking her phone one more time before sleep. I know, he typed back. Tomorrow we end this. He sat on the porch steps, watching the street. Earl's light was on across the way. The old vet appeared in the window, coffee cup in hand, nodded once. 2 soldiers, 1 more mission. Harold touched his father's dog tags. He'd started wearing them under his shirt. Borrowed strength from a dead man who'd known how to fight. Tomorrow, Linda would realize her reconciliation had been cover for Harold's preparation. Tomorrow, the war began in earnest. But tonight, Harold let her think she'd won. Let her sleep easy next to the man she thought was too weak to fight back. Sometimes the best strategy was looking defeated right up until you weren't. Sophie's pickup truck rattled into Earl's driveway at 8 sharp. Harold watched her climb out, 22 years old, law student, 3 years since he'd seen her face to face. She had her mother's eyes but her great-grandfather's jaw, stubborn, ready for a fight. She pulled a laptop bag from the truck, turned, saw Harold on Earl's porch. Grandpa? Sweetheart. They stood there a moment, 3 years of distance between them. Then Sophie crossed it in 4 strides, wrapped her arms around him. Harold held his granddaughter and realized how much he'd missed her, how much Linda had stolen beyond just money and property. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Sophie's voice was muffled against his shoulder. Didn't know I could. Linda said you didn't want to see me. Sophie pulled back, eyes blazing. She told me you didn't want to see me. Said you cared more about dead cars than living family. Of course she had. Keep them separated. Keep Sophie from seeing through the lies. Earl appeared in the doorway. Coffee's on. Let's get to work. Inside, Sophie opened her laptop at Earl's kitchen table. Her fingers flew across the keyboard like she was conducting a symphony of evidence. Grandma's iPad password is still your birthday, Sophie said. She never changed it. I accessed her cloud backup remotely 3 days ago. She pulled up the first email. This is from Derek to someone named Jim Voss. Dated 2 months ago. Harold read it. Target acquired. Old man completely clueless. Property appraisal attached. Easy $85,000 commission for me. Target. There was that word again. Sophie pulled up another. Linda to Derek. He suspects something, but he won't act. Too weak and tired to fight back. She called you weak, Sophie said, voice shaking with fury. Her own husband. Earl set coffee mugs down. There's more, isn't there? 217 emails, Sophie said. Financial records, text messages, calendar appointments disguised as book club, and grocery shopping. She pulled up a spreadsheet. Linda opened a secret account. Derek's listed as co-signer. $18,000 deposited 2 weeks ago. Voss, Earl said. Advance payment for her cooperation. Sophie wasn't done. She pulled up a new file. I called a friend at law school whose father's a private investigator, had him look into Derek Sloan. She turned the laptop around. 2 previous cases. Margaret Henderson, 71, lost her family farm. Robert Chen, 66, lost his restaurant. Harold leaned forward. Mrs. Chen's husband, the one with Alzheimer's. Derek used the daughter-in-law that time, Sophie said. Got her to forge Robert's signature. By the time the family realized what happened, the property was sold. She pulled up court documents. No criminal charges filed. Victims too ashamed or exhausted to prosecute. It's a system, Earl said. He's done this before. He'll do it again. Sophie's eyes met Harold's. You're not weak, Grandpa. You're targeted. This is what he does. Predator with a business model. Harold stood, walked to the window. His workshop was visible from here. His father had built it with his own hands, taught Harold everything in that building. How to work, how to be honest, how to keep your word. What's the play? Harold asked. Sophie pulled out a legal pad. We've got Earl's 6 months of surveillance. We've got my digital forensics. We need law enforcement involved to make this stick. Earl nodded. My nephew works for the county sheriff. Deputy Martinez owes me from the war. He'll come. And I've got a contact, Sophie said. Property fraud investigator named Rourke. Tried to prosecute Derek on the Henderson case, but it fell apart. He's been waiting for another shot. Harold turned from the window. How do we do this? Dinner? Sophie said. You invite Linda and Derek. Tell them you want to discuss the future. Let them think you're surrendering. Then we show up, Earl added. With the evidence. With law enforcement present. Sophie tapped her legal pad. Three-phase presentation. Earl gives the timeline, shows the pattern. I present digital evidence, shows the conspiracy. Investigator Rourke delivers the legal consequences, shows them they're done. Linda gets a choice, Harold said. Cooperate and testify against Derek, or face charges herself. Sophie's expression hardened. She'll choose herself, Grandpa. She always does. I know, Harold sat back down. But I need to offer it. Need to know for certain who she is. They spent the next hour planning. Earl called his nephew. Deputy Martinez agreed to attend in uniform. Sophie contacted Investigator Rourke, who jumped at the chance for a second shot at Derek. Saturday night, Harold said. 5 days. I'll invite Linda tonight. Tell her we need to talk about our future, the property. She'll bring Derek, Sophie said. Think they've won. Let them. Harold looked at the evidence spread across the table, physical and digital, 6 months of betrayal documented in paper and pixels. 5 days, they think they're coming to a surrender. Instead, they're walking into a reckoning. Earl raised his coffee mug. To justice. Sophie raised hers. To family. Harold raised his, looked at his granddaughter and his neighbor. Not blood family exactly, but the kind of family that mattered, the kind that showed up when you needed them. To standing up, Harold said. They drank to that. Later, walking back to his truck, Sophie stopped him. Grandpa, once we do this, there's no going back. You'll lose her completely. Harold looked at his wedding ring. 40 years on his finger. He twisted it, felt the weight. Lost her months ago, sweetheart. Maybe years. Just didn't know it. He met Sophie's eyes. But I found you again, and I'm not losing my father's shop. That's worth fighting for. Sophie hugged him again. Saturday, then? Saturday. Harold drove home. Linda was in the kitchen making lunch, humming that song she used to hum when they were young. Good morning? She asked. Too bright. Too interested. Yeah. Harold poured coffee. Linda, I've been thinking. We should have dinner Saturday. Talk about our future, the property, everything. Her eyes lit up. Victory, she was thinking. Surrender. That sounds good, Harold. That sounds really good. You can invite Derek if you want. Might as well have everyone at the table. She tried to hide her smile. Failed. I'll let him know. Harold nodded, sipped his coffee, thought about his father's dog tags under his shirt. Thought about Saturday night. Thought about the look on Derek's face when he realized the old man wasn't as weak as he'd thought. 5 days. Then they'd see who was weak. They'd see who was done. 5 days felt like 5 years. Sunday morning, Harold sat in his usual pew at church. The congregation knew, small towns being what they are, word had spread about Linda and the real estate agent. Not the details, not the conspiracy, just enough to make people whisper. Pastor Jim's sermon was about truth and justice. He kept glancing at Harold, little nods of solidarity that said more than words could. After service, Tom Henderson shook Harold's hand, held it longer than usual. Heard you're going through some things. Just want you to know. You do what you gotta do, Harold. Some of us remember what it means to stand up. The older men nodded. The younger ones looked curious but respectful. The women offered casseroles and prayers. Harold thanked them all, felt their support like a warm coat on a cold day. Monday, he invited Linda to dinner Saturday night. Kept his voice casual, defeated even. We should talk, he said, about our future, the property, figure out what's best. Linda's face lit up like Christmas morning. She thought he was surrendering, thought the old man was finally folding. That sounds good, Harold, really good. Derek should probably be there too. If this involves the shop, might as well have everyone at the table. She tried to hide her excitement, failed completely. I'll let him know. That afternoon, Harold heard her on the phone in the bedroom, voice low, giddy. He wants to meet Saturday. I think he's giving up. No, he sounded tired, defeated. This is it, Derek. This is really it. Harold stood in the hallway, listened to his wife celebrate his supposed surrender, and felt nothing. Not anger, not hurt, just the cold certainty of what was coming. Tuesday night was Linda's usual affair night. She kissed his cheek before leaving. Book club, she said. Have fun. She wouldn't be having fun much longer. Wednesday, Harold worked in the shop. Sophie came by with lunch, sat with him in comfortable silence. They rebuilt a carburetor together, hands working in sync, teaching, learning, the way it should be. You doing okay, Grandpa? Sophie asked, not looking up from her work. I will be, after Saturday. No second thoughts? Harold wiped his hands on a rag. 40 years of marriage and she called me weak. Put it in writing. Planned to steal everything my father built. He looked at Sophie. No second thoughts. Earl stopped by that evening. They sat on Harold's porch, watching the street. Didn't need to talk much. Two old soldiers waiting for the battle they knew was coming. Deputy Martinez is confirmed, Earl said. 6 o'clock Saturday. Rourke? He'll be there. Said he's been waiting 2 years for another shot at Derek. Harold nodded, sipped his coffee. It had gone cold, but he didn't care. Thursday, Linda was extra sweet. Cooked dinner, touched his arm when she passed, smiled like she meant it. All performance, all strategy. Keep the old man docile until the trap was sprung. Derek drove by the workshop that afternoon, slowed down, took pictures with his phone, already planning the renovation, probably, already spending his commission. Harold watched from the window, waved. Derek waved back, that smug smirk on his face. Enjoy it while it lasts, Harold thought. Friday was the longest day. Harold cleaned the house, made everything perfect. Linda commented on it. Why are you cleaning so much? It's just dinner. Want everything right, Harold said. Important evening. She heard what she wanted to hear. Thought important meant surrender. Thought it meant victory. Harold pressed his only good shirt, retrieved his father's dog tags from the drawer, hung them around his neck under the collar. Borrowed strength from a man who'd known how to fight. Sophie called. You sure you're ready for this? Ready as I'll ever be. Earl and I will be there early. Get everything set up. I know. Grandpa, I'm proud of you. Harold's throat tightened. Save that for after. See if I'm worth being proud of. That night, Linda primped in the bathroom. New dress, full makeup, jewelry Harold hadn't seen in years. Getting beautiful for the wrong man, for the wrong reasons. Harold watched her and wondered when he'd stop knowing her, or if he'd ever really known her at all. You look nice, he said, because it was true. Thank you. She kissed his cheek. Tomorrow's going to be a good day, Harold. A new start for us. Yeah, he said. A new start. She went to bed happy. Harold lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, feeling his father's dog tags against his chest. Saturday morning came too fast and too slow. Harold was up at 5, coffee in his father's mug, watching the sunrise from the porch. Earl emerged from his house at the same time, coffee in hand, sat on his own porch. They didn't wave, didn't need to, just sat there, two old men who'd seen combat, waiting for one more fight. Sophie's truck pulled up at 7. She climbed out with her laptop bag and a look of fierce determination. Morning, Grandpa. Morning, sweetheart. Today's the day. Today's the day. They went inside. Linda was still asleep. Harold made breakfast, hands steady, no shaking, no fear, just the calm that comes before the storm. At noon, Deputy Martinez called. I'll be there at 6, Mr. Webb, uniform and all. At 1, Investigator Rourke confirmed. Wouldn't miss this for anything. Derek Sloan's been a thorn in my side for 2 years. At 2, Derek texted Linda. Harold saw the notification on her phone. See you tonight. Bring the surrender papers. Surrender papers, like this was already done, like Harold had already lost. At 4, Linda started getting ready, humming in the shower. Happy. At 5, Sophie and Earl arrived. Set up the evidence in the dining room. Laptop, journal, documents. Everything organized, ready to deploy. At 5:30, Harold put on his pressed shirt, felt the dog tags beneath it, looked at himself in the mirror. 68 years old, mechanic's hands, his father's eyes looking back. He was ready. At 5:45, the doorbell rang early. Earl, journal under his arm. Linda's face showed confusion. What's Earl doing here? Harold opened the door wider. He's joining us. Hope that's all right. Earl walked in, nodded at Linda, took a seat at the dining room table. Linda looked at Harold. What's going on? Just dinner, Harold said. Derek should be here soon. Right on cue, headlights in the driveway, Derek's Mercedes. Linda went to greet him at the door. Too familiar, too comfortable. She brought him inside like he owned the place. Derek saw Earl, frowned. Who's this? Neighbor, Harold said. Wanted to join us. Discuss community matters. Derek's suspicions started rising, but he couldn't identify the threat yet. The table was set. Harold at the head, Earl beside him, Linda and Derek across. Then Sophie emerged from the kitchen, laptop bag, legal pad, eyes cold as winter. Hello, grandmother. Linda's face went white. Sophie? What are you? The doorbell rang. Harold answered it. Deputy Martinez in full uniform, Investigator Rourke in a suit. Derek stood. What the hell is this? Harold stepped aside, let them enter. Martinez took position at the door. Rourke stood behind Linda and Derek. The room fell silent. Harold returned to his seat at the head of the table, looked at Linda, at Derek. At 40 years of lies about to come crashing down. Sit down, Harold said. His voice was steady, cold, authoritative. We need to talk about the future of my property, my father's workshop. He paused. Let it sink in. And your criminal attempt to steal it. Derek's face went from confused to calculating to afraid in the space of 3 seconds. The reckoning had begun. Derek's face went through a whole show. Confusion, calculation, fear. Then he tried charm, like flipping a switch. This is a misunderstanding, Harold. We can work this out like reasonable people. Sit down, Harold said again. Something in his voice made Derek sit. Linda's hands shook, reaching for her water glass. Harold, please, can we talk privately? No more private conversations. Harold looked at Earl. If you would. Earl opened his leather journal. The sound of pages turning was loud in the silent room. April 12, 2024, Earl read. Derek Sloan vehicle, Texas license plate XYZ1234, parked 2 blocks from Webb residence, 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. Derek's smirk started fading. Earl continued. April 19th, Linda Webb vehicle observed at Route 9 Hotel. Met by Derek Sloan, 7 p.m. check-in. He read 15 entries, 47 total in the journal, but 15 was enough. Each one a nail in a coffin. Earl slid photographs across the table. Linda and Derek entering the hotel, leaving hand in hand. Derek meeting with Voss at his office. Linda at the county clerk's building. I was documenting crimes in progress, Earl said quietly. 6 months' worth. Linda tried to speak. Derek shot her a look that said, shut up. Sophie opened her laptop. Her voice was cold, professional. Everything a lawyer should sound like. Email from Derek Sloan to Jim Voss, dated March 15th. She turned the screen so Martinez and Rourke could see. Target acquired. Old man completely clueless. Property appraisal attached. Easy $85,000 commission. Derek's face was stone now. Trapped animal trying not to show it. Sophie pulled up another. Linda Webb to Derek Sloan, March 20th. He suspects something, but he won't act. Too weak and tired to fight back. Her voice cracked on weak. She looked at her grandmother with something beyond anger, beyond hurt, something that looked like grief for who she'd thought this woman was. You called him weak, Sophie said. Your own husband. Linda opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Sophie kept going. Financial records show Linda Webb opened a secret account February 1st. Derek Sloan listed as co-signer. $18,000 deposited April 28th. She looked at Rourke. Advance payment from Jim Voss for cooperation in the property fraud scheme. Investigator Rourke stepped forward. He'd been waiting for this for 2 years. Mr. Sloan, I've reviewed the evidence. Forged signatures on property documents. False co-ownership claims. Power of attorney obtained through fraud. He pulled out a document. Texas Penal Code, Section 32.46. Fraudulent securing of document execution. Felony. 2 to 10 years. Derek found his voice. You can't prove fraud. Those documents are legal. Your signature analysis says otherwise. Rourke slid a paper across. Harold Webb is left-handed. This signature slants right. The notary stamp is irregular. Witnesses are fabricated. This isn't the first time, is it, Derek? Sophie pulled up court records. Margaret Henderson, 2022. Robert Chen, 2023. Same pattern. Elderly property owners. Women close to them used for access. Forged documents. Your partner Voss buying cheap. Derek's jaw clenched. Those cases were dismissed. Because the victims were too ashamed to testify, Rourke said. Not this time. Mr. Webb is pressing charges. So are the Hendersons and the Chens. You made this a pattern, Derek. That makes it organized fraud. The room was silent except for the tick of the wall clock. Harold watched Derek's confidence crumble piece by piece. Watched him search for an exit that didn't exist. Derek tried one last play, stood up, pointed at Linda. This was her idea. She forged the signatures. She filed the false claims. I was just helping a friend with real estate advice. Linda's face, shock, betrayal, understanding washing over it like cold water. She'd been used, just a tool, a key to unlock Harold's property. You said you loved me, Linda whispered. Derek laughed, actually laughed, cruel and sharp. Love? You were a means to an end, sweetheart. A way to get access. That's all you ever were. Harold watched his wife's world collapse. Watched her realize she'd thrown away 40 years for a man who'd never cared about her at all. He felt nothing. The sympathy well had run dry months ago. Deputy Martinez stepped forward. Mr. Sloan, I need you to come with me. We have questions downtown. You can't arrest me without a warrant. We're not arresting you yet, Rourke said. But we will. How this goes depends on your choices right now. He turned to Linda. Mrs. Webb, you have options. Cooperate fully. Testify against Mr. Sloan. Accept divorce terms. Avoid prosecution. He paused. Or face charges as co-conspirator. Prison time. Public trial. Your choice. Linda looked at Derek. He wouldn't meet her eyes. She looked at Harold. I didn't know he was just using me. You knew you were using me, Harold said. That's enough. Linda's tears were real now. First genuine emotion Harold had seen from her in months. I'll cooperate. I'll sign whatever you want. I'll testify. Derek turned on her. You bitch. Martinez moved fast for a man his age. Had Derek's arms behind his back before he could finish the sentence. Cuffs clicked. You have the right to remain silent. Derek struggled. Looked at Harold with pure hatred. This isn't over, old man. Harold stood, walked over to Derek, looked him in the eye. Son, I'm 68 years old. Every morning I wake up is a victory. He glanced at the cuffs. You're 52, heading to county jail. Who won? Derek's face twisted with rage and fear. Harold leaned closer. You said I should step aside for younger men. Well, I stepped up instead. Martinez led Derek to the door. The Mercedes was still in the driveway, but Derek wouldn't be driving it. Linda sat at the table, broken. Sophie placed divorce papers in front of her. Sign. Linda's hand shook, but she signed. Property relinquishment. Agreement to testify. Dissolution of marriage after 40 years, reduced to signatures on paper. She stood, gathered her purse, stopped at the door. When did you stop seeing me, Harold? Harold thought about it. Gave her honesty, since that's all he had left to give. I saw you every day for 40 years, Linda. Question is, when did you stop being worth seeing? She flinched like he'd struck her. That's cruel. No, cruel is what you did. This is just honest. Linda left. The door closed. Her car started. Drove away. 40 years, gone in one dinner. The house was quiet. Just Harold, Sophie, Earl, Martinez, and Rourke. Properties secured, Rourke said. Sales voided. Derek will face multiple felony charges. Harold sat down. Felt every one of his 68 years. I won, he said. So why does it feel like I lost everything? Earl's voice was quiet. Because you did lose something. Just not the things that matter. Harold looked around, at Sophie, fierce and loyal, at Earl, steady as stone, at the evidence of truth spread across his table. He'd lost a wife, kept his father's legacy, found his granddaughter again, not the trade he'd wanted, but the one he'd gotten. What now, Grandpa? Sophie asked. Harold looked at his wedding ring, twisted it off his finger for the first time in 40 years. Now? He set the ring on the table. Now we figure out what comes next. Sunday morning, Harold woke up alone for the first time in 40 years. The bed felt wrong, too big, too quiet. Linda's pillow still had the dent where her head used to rest, and Harold stared at it for a long time before getting up. He made coffee, poured 2 cups out of habit, stared at the second one for a full minute before dumping it down the sink. Church felt like walking through a room full of people who just stopped talking about you, which, in a small town, was exactly what it was. Harold took his usual pew. The whispers started before he sat down. But then Tom Henderson slid in beside him. Then Bill Patterson. Then 3 other men from the Sunday breakfast group. Filled the pew around him like a wall. Pastor Jim's sermon was about forgiveness and moving forward. He didn't look at Harold when he said it, which meant he was talking directly to Harold. After service, the reaction split like a creek around a stone. The older men shook his hand. Firm grips. You did right, Harold. Took guts. Should have done it sooner. The women brought casseroles. So many casseroles Harold could have fed the whole block. If you need anything, dear, you're in our prayers. The younger folks kept their distance. Curious, but respectful. Harold had become a story. The old man who fought back. Monday, Harold tried to work. Made it to the shop at 6, coffee in hand, but his hands shook too bad to hold a wrench steady. He sat in his father's chair and stared at nothing for 2 hours. Mrs. Chen found him there. Set down her container of dumplings, studied his face with those knowing eyes. My Robert went through similar, she said. Different details, same betrayal. Took him a year to trust his own shadow again. She squeezed his shoulder. But he survived. You will too. Harold nodded. Didn't trust his voice. Tuesday, Investigator Rourke called with updates. Derek had been formally charged with 3 counts of property fraud, 1 count of conspiracy, 1 count of elder financial abuse. Bail set at $50,000. Derek couldn't make it. He was staying in county lockup until trial. Linda's cooperating fully, Rourke said. Her testimony will seal the case. Wednesday night, Harold broke. He was in the workshop trying to organize tools when he found Linda's old coffee mug. The one she'd left there years ago, back when she used to visit him at work. Back when she cared. He held it in his hands and something inside him cracked. 40 years. 40 years of marriage, and it came down to a coffee mug and forged signatures and hotel receipts. The sobs came quiet at first, then harder, shoulders shaking. Gripped tight on that mug like it was the only real thing left. Sophie found him like that. She'd been staying in the guest room, worried about him. Didn't say a word, just sat down on the concrete floor beside him, put her hand on his back and let him grieve. I know she betrayed me, Harold said when he could speak. I know stopping them was right. So why do I miss her? Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then, you don't miss her, Grandpa. You miss who she was. Who you thought she was 40 years ago. That person's worth mourning. Harold wiped his face with the back of his hand. When did you get so smart? Law school, and having a grandfather worth learning from. Thursday, Derek's lawyer tried to get Earl's evidence thrown out, called it illegal surveillance. The motion failed. Judge said Earl was a private citizen documenting suspicious activity in his neighborhood. Perfectly legal. Friday brought a letter. Linda's sister delivered it, looking embarrassed. Harold opened it at the kitchen table. Linda's handwriting. An apology that felt hollow. I never meant to hurt you this badly. Justification that felt worse. You were always married to that shop, not me. A request that made him tired. Can we talk? Find some closure? Harold read it once. Walked to the workshop. Fed it to the stove. Watched it burn. Sophie had followed him. You okay with that? She wants closure. But some doors don't close, Sophie. They just stay open and empty. The prosecutor called that afternoon. Derek's lawyer wants a plea deal. 5 years, full restitution to previous victims, permanent fraud registry, no trial. Quick and clean. Harold thought about it. Part of him wanted the trial. Wanted Derek exposed in open court. Wanted everyone to see what he'd done. But another part was just tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of reliving it. Ready to build something instead of tearing down. Take the deal, Harold said. 5 years is enough. Saturday brought a stranger, young woman, maybe 25, hesitant at the workshop door. Mr. Webb, I'm Sarah Chen. My grandfather was Robert. He died last year, but before he did, he told me about you, about standing up to people like Derek. Harold set down his wrench. Come in. I'm in a situation. My boyfriend and his brother, they're trying to get my grandmother to sign over her house. She's got dementia, and I don't know what to do. Harold looked at her, saw himself 3 months ago, scared, alone, not sure who to trust. Sophie, he called. His granddaughter emerged from the office. We got someone who needs help. Sophie grabbed her legal pad. Tell us everything. As Sarah talked, Harold realized something. The fight with Derek wasn't the end, it was the beginning. There'd always be another predator, another elderly person who needed help, another family being torn apart by greed. But now Harold knew how to fight. And more than that, he knew he didn't have to fight alone. Earl appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand. Another one? Another one, Harold confirmed. Earl pulled up a chair. All right, let's make a plan. Sunday morning, Harold woke up alone again. But this time, it didn't feel quite so empty. He made coffee. 1 cup. Sat on the porch and watched the sunrise. Earl emerged from his house at the same time. They raised their mugs to each other across the street. No words needed. Sophie's truck was in the driveway. She was staying for a while, finishing law school online, helping with the shop, helping with cases like Sarah's. Harold's phone buzzed. Marcus, the young mechanic who'd been asking to apprentice. Mr. Webb, still okay if I start Monday? Harold typed back. Monday's perfect. Bring work gloves and a willingness to learn. The workshop sign caught the morning light. Webb's son was barely visible anymore, worn down by weather and time. Harold made a mental note. Get a new sign made. Webb's son, teaching shop. Not just his son anymore. Sophie, Marcus. Whoever else needed to learn, the son was bigger than blood. It was legacy. Knowledge passed forward. He finished his coffee, stood, felt his father's dog tags under his shirt, lost a wife, kept the shop, found a purpose. Not the life he'd planned, but maybe the life he needed. Monday, they'd start fresh, teaching, building, helping others fight their own battles. For now, Harold had survived, and sometimes survival was victory enough. 3 months later, the workshop hummed with life it hadn't seen in years. Harold stood at his father's workbench, teaching Sophie how to diagnose a misfiring cylinder. Marcus was at the next bay over, rebuilding a carburetor under Earl's watchful eye. The radio played low, some old country song Harold's father would have recognized. The new sign out front read Webb's Son Teaching Shop in fresh paint. Sophie had insisted on adding teaching, said it mattered that people knew what they were building here. She was right. 3 other young folks had asked to apprentice. Word was spreading, not just about fixing cars, but about learning from someone who'd stood up when it mattered. The morning coffee ritual had changed too. Harold, Earl, and Sophie on the porch at 6 a.m. 3 generations, 3 cups, easy silence that meant more than words. Sentencing's today, Sophie said, checking her phone. You still want to go? Harold nodded. Need to see it end. The courthouse was downtown. Harold and Sophie took seats in the gallery. Derek was led in wearing orange, thinner than Harold remembered. Defeated, Judge Morrison didn't waste time. Mr. Sloan, you systematically preyed on elderly citizens, violated trust, destroyed families for profit. 5 years in state prison, full restitution to victims. A lifetime registration on the fraud offender list. Derek's lawyer tried to say something. The judge cut him off. Does the defendant wish to address the court? Derek stood. I'm sorry to those I hurt. Didn't look at Harold. Didn't mean a word of it. Margaret Henderson spoke, voice shaking but strong. Talked about losing her farm, her husband's Alzheimer's, Derek's cruelty. Robert Chen's daughter spoke next. Tears streaming. Her father had died still ashamed of being fooled. Harold was offered the chance. He shook his head. Already said my piece. Derek was led away in chains. Glanced at Harold one last time. No words. Just the look of a man who'd underestimated the wrong person. Outside, Sophie asked, How do you feel? Harold thought about it. Like closing a book I'm done reading. The divorce papers came the following week. Final decree. Harold signed them at the kitchen table, no ceremony. 40 years reduced to a signature and a stamp. He found the wedding photos in the closet, put them in a box, stored it in the attic. Not destroyed, not displayed, just passed. His wedding ring went in a drawer next to his father's dog tags, both pieces of history now. One he'd earned, one he'd survived. Linda's sister called once. She wants to talk. Find closure. Harold kept his voice kind but firm. Tell her I wish her well. But we don't have anything to say to each other. She made her choice. I made mine. The lightness he felt after hanging up surprised him. You okay? Sophie asked. She'd been listening from the doorway. Better than okay. I'm free. The '67 Mustang sat in the corner, finally complete. Harold and Sophie had finished it together. 3 months of evenings, hands working in sync, building something instead of defending something. It was covered now, waiting for spring, but it was done. Promise kept to his father, shared with his granddaughter. Marcus's first solo repair was a success. The kid had talent, reminded Harold of himself at 19, eager, capable, hungry to learn. Mr. Webb, Marcus said one afternoon, why didn't you ever expand this place? Your dad called it Webb's Son. You could have built something bigger. Harold looked around the shop. At Sophie reviewing case files for Sarah Chen. At Marcus organizing tools the way Harold had taught him. At Earl documenting everything in his journal. Good things now, not crimes. Maybe I did, Harold said. Just took me 68 years to figure out what son really meant. It wasn't about blood, never had been. It was about passing knowledge forward, teaching someone else to stand up, to fight for what mattered, to know their worth. Sarah Chen's case was moving forward. Sophie had found a legal aid lawyer. Earl had documentation of the boyfriend's scheme. Sarah's grandmother was safe. There'd be others. There always were. But now Harold knew what to do, and he had a team. Developer Voss called one last time. Offered $400,000 for the property, more than before. Not for sale, Harold said. Not for any price. This place teaches now. I respect that, Mr. Webb. Harold hung up, looked at the workshop his father built, the place where 3 generations had learned what honest work meant, lost a wife, kept a legacy, found a family. The math didn't balance on paper. But in his chest, where it counted, Harold felt something he hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not happiness. Not yet. But peace. And that was enough. Evening came. Harold locked the workshop, tested the door twice. Old habit. Sophie and Marcus headed upstairs to the apartment above the shop. Both lived there now, chosen family under one roof. Earl waved from his porch. See you tomorrow? Every day, friend. Harold walked home alone. The house was quiet, but it wasn't lonely anymore. Loneliness was missing someone. This was just space, clean and his. He made dinner, One portion sat at the table with a book Earl had loaned him. His phone buzzed. Sophie. Grandpa, another case just called. Woman in her 70s. Nephew trying to forge power of attorney. Harold smiled. We'll handle it. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. He set the phone down, looked around the kitchen. 40 years of memories, good and bad. Linda's absence was everywhere and nowhere, but so was his father's presence, and Sophie's laughter, and the knowledge that he'd stood up when it mattered. Some things you fight for, some things you fight to stop, and some things, the ones that matter, you teach someone else to fight for, so they never break the same way twice. Harold finished his dinner, washed the single plate, turned off the lights. Tomorrow, the work continued. But tonight, he'd survived. He'd won. And that was everything. Late November evening, the workshop stood quiet under a sky going purple with dusk. Harold sat alone at his father's workbench, hands resting on wood 3 generations had touched. The grain was smooth where palms had worn it down, his father's hands, his own, now Sophie's. The radio played soft, that same country station his old man used to listen to. Harold could almost hear him humming along. On the wall, his father's photo looked down. Harold met those eyes and nodded once. Did it, Dad. Kept the place. Kept my dignity, too. Sophie's law books were stacked beside the vintage tools, old and new, side by side. Marcus's first solo repair checklist was pinned up, kid's handwriting, but his great-grandfather's precision. The '67 Mustang sat in the corner, covered and waiting for spring. Promise kept. Legacy shared. Harold picked up his father's wrench, turned it over in his hands, thought about everything it had built, everything it had taught him. They say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but nobody said you couldn't teach an old dog to teach. He'd lost a wife, found a purpose, lost a marriage, found a family, the kind you choose, the kind that shows up when it matters. Lost his illusions, found the truth. And truth, turned out, was worth more than 40 years of comfortable lies. 68 years to learn what his father never told him. You don't measure a life by what gets taken from you. You measure it by what you refuse to surrender, and what you choose to pass on. The wrench clicked into place, engine parts secured, something fixed. Across the street, Earl's porch light came on, right on schedule. Friendship, steady as sunrise. Sophie's window glowed warm above the shop. Family, close enough to matter. Harold stood, stretched his back, locked the workshop. Tomorrow, someone else would need help. Someone else would walk through that door, scared and alone, looking for a way to stand up. And Harold would teach them. Some things you can fix with your hands. Some things you can't fix ever. And some things, the ones that truly matter, you teach someone else to fix. So they never break the same way twice. That's the legacy. That's what lasts. Harold walked home under November stars, his father's dog tags quiet against his chest, and knew in his bones he'd done right. The workshop would stand. The teaching would continue. And that was enough. That was everything.